From the land of the myth, it's the philosophy jerks.
Good afternoon, good evening, good night, good morning. I don't even know. Whenever you're listening to this, this is the Philosophy Jerks, episode number 26. I am Brian, joined as always by...
Brian, should I have a nickname this time?
You haven't had a nickname in a while, Josh.
Okay, call me Yeshua.
Yeshua. That was your old internet name.
Yeah, and it's like Hebrew for Joshua.
So Yeshua and Brian, and together we are the cure for the common conversation. Josh, how you been?
I've been good, man. How are you?
I'm doing okay. A lot of people are depressed summer is ending, but I'm happy about it because fall is my favorite season.
Ditto, man. I love to see things die slowly in front of me. And it's nothing like trees slowly dying in front of me and lighting up the roads with beautiful colors.
Yeah, the colors are the best part, but I just like the cooler temperatures. I feel like I can dress better for fall. I look better in the fall. I'm not sweaty and hot all the time. It's pretty good.
This is true. I've already broken out my fall jacket, and I gotta say I look pretty badass.
You know, it hasn't really been that cold yet. There's been a day here or there, but it's still been pretty summer-style weather. I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, I know, but I feel the death grip in tow. It's going to be any week now, Brian, and there'll be a no return.
I know. You hate winter. I don't mind it till February. I'm cool till February. Then I start to snap, but, you know, I'll be all right.
See, I'm a defeatist. I know it's coming.
I think that'll lead into what we're going to be talking about later.
I think so, Brian. But before we get into that, how about that Pope?
Josh, I have to make a confession here.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, exactly. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I love this Pope.
Yeah, I do too. And it's really, really weird. I love this Pope, and he doesn't make me want to become a Christian. I like him for him alone. I don't like him because he's trying to make me feel or act a certain way.
Well, you know what it is? He preaches and practices how should I put it? The actual real tenets of the good parts of Christianity.
Yeah, and you know what? I really am sad that that's like the main show. That's the draw to this guy is that he's doing his job correctly. But right. God bless him, he's doing it right. I love everything he's doing so far. Yeah,
we've discussed on this show before how I went to Catholic high school and all that. And small disclosure, I really haven't gone back to church since high school. But and like you, he hasn't inspired me to go back to church, but he's inspired me as an individual that preaches a message I appreciate and I agree with. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't agree with everything he says. I mean, the abortion issue, I don't think we'll ever meet eye to eye on. He actually goes out there and preaches what he practices is very refreshing and almost inspiring to me.
Absolutely. And yeah, I agree with you, Brian. I don't necessarily agree with everything that spouts out of his mouth, but the character and the personality that he's coming from with it is, like you said, very refreshing.
It is, and it's nice to see. It's nice to see with someone with such a bully pulpit, so to speak, go out there and actually expound these ideas of treating people equally, working for a better world, not only in interpersonal relationships, but taking care of the environment, which is great to hear.
Yeah, I love that he's pro climate control awareness.
Yeah, and did you hear what he did? This is the one that I love the most. So he spoke to the U.S. Congress, and they had arranged a bigwig dinner for him, or lunch, bigwig lunch. So it was going to be all the kind of like the top politicians and all that. We're going to have a private lunch with him. He skipped it, Josh. He skipped it to go hand out food to the homeless people in Washington, D.C.
That's amazing.
It's just another example why I love this guy, because not only does he talk the talk, he walks the walk.
Well, I have to be a little bit of a moron here and say that my favorite thing that the Pope has done is, how do I say this? It's going to put out a progressive rock album.
Okay, I've only heard a little bit about this. Can you give a little further detail?
Yeah, I can, sure. So there's this guy. I don't know his name off the top of my head, so I do apologize. But for the last, few popes in modern history, he's done a musical compilation with, their prayers and speeches over top of them. And for the most part, they've just been, hymns and, Gregorian chants, all that boring shit. Well,
hey, there's nothing wrong with Gregorian chants, all right?
There's nothing wrong with it until, you have to drive to work in the middle of the night.
Fair enough.
But anyways, this guy, he's making, the compilation tape for, Pope, Francis here, and I forget the exact quote, but basically he said that, he sat down, he reread and rewatched and re-intook all of the Pope's stuff, and used his personality and wit and kind of mannerisms, and like you said, the way he's walking the walk instead of just talking the talk.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that there was no other musical genre that would have fit other than progressive rock.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
I find it hard to argue with, actually.
Yeah, I do too. And in fact, the first track from the album is available over at Rolling Stone. If you just Google, Pope Francis progressive rock, you'll find the Rolling Stone article, and there's a SoundCloud link right there in the article. Give it a play. It's, it's not the world's best progressive rock, but if you consider the context, it's pretty impressive.
Here's one thing I worry about with Pope Francis, though. Now, we're both fans, but at the same time, is he really great, or is he just great in comparison to the last Pope, who was, a Sith Lord?
Very much so. There's a third thing here, too. If you go by the religious nuts in the Christian world, Pope Francis is acting very much like the Antichrist is described in their crazy non-Bible text. So there's a possibility that he's the Antichrist.
Well, remember what Chris said in episode 20. His wall space is the last picture for popes.
Very true.
All right. Well, Josh, if this is end of times, there's only one thing we should do to prepare for end of times.
Slam beers back until we black out.
You got it. It's the beer review.
Oh, boy.
Beer, beer, beer. I'm going for a beer. Beer, beer, beer. I'm gonna drink some beer. I like drinking beer. Lovely, lovely beer. Beer, beer, beer.
All right, Josh. This beer comes from near where you are right now at the Think and Drink Studios. What are we drinking this episode?
This episode, Brian, we're drinking Sacred Cow IPA, which is really funny if you think about it. Sacred Cow Indian Pale Ale.
Yeah.
Right? And the company that brews it is Arbor Brewing Company. Now, I want to say they're out of Ann Arbor, as most people do, but if you inspect the location just slightly closer, you'll see that it's actually brewed in Ypsilanti, which is just south of here.
Ypsilanti, yes. That is a name that no one outside of Michigan could pronounce if they looked at the word.
That is true. That's up there with some of the more complicated ones. Although there is that town or city in England, or the UK, that's like 200 characters long that weatherman pronounced correctly.
I don't even know about this one.
Oh, man, yeah. So I'll post it up on our Facebook and Twitter, but there's this really long city in the UK, and the weatherman on the spot, for no reason, out of nowhere, pronounced it in one try completely correct.
In 4th grade, I had a teacher that made us, for our spelling test, spell anti-disestablishmentarianism. I still can't even say it right. 24 letters long.
Why? What was the point?
That was like the big spelling test mountain to climb for the last spelling test of the year. Anti-disestablishmentarianism. That's close enough.
Did you get it right?
I did, just because that's the thing, right, with learning. All I did was just repeatedly drill it in my head so I could spell it on the test. I don't know how to spell it now. I have no idea. I don't even know what it means all these years later.
Well, I can say that low levels of brainwashing are effective in the right conditions.
Very much so. It was one of those things where it felt good to get it right on the test, and I immediately just purged it from my brain.
Truly so.
All right.
Let's get back to the beer. I'm sure no one cares.
Exactly. So, Sacred Cow IPA, Sacred Cow India Pale Ale. You're right. That is pretty funny. Here's the description from Arbor Brewing Company. It says, coppery gold hue with a full floral cascade hop aroma. Rich beady malts lie a perfect foundation for the profusion of tangy citrus hops that infuse this beer with a distinct ruby red grapefruit quality that starts on the palate and lingers through a long, satisfying finish. Ooh. I have to admit, sorry to step over you, but I have to admit I really don't like grapefruit right off. I have to admit that.
So I will admit that right now there's half a bottle of grapefruit juice in my fridge. I love
Really?
I love grapefruits.
I mean, it's really good for you. I wish I did like it, but there's something about that acidic taste of grapefruit I just can't get into.
Well, I just love the bitter disappointment of life, and grapefruit embodies that.
You know what? I realized to myself recently that I like vegetables more than fruits, and I am aware that makes me very strange.
So we need to brainwash you, Brian.
What, to like fruits more?
Yes, exactly. You have to have more sugar. As a male, you need to eat less healthy.
Well, I do eat less healthy. I mean, I make up for my sugar deficit in other areas, with like ding dongs and cinnamon rolls.
God bless cinnamon rolls.
Exactly. Do you want the pairings real quick before we drink this? They give you food pairings.
Yeah, let's hear the food pairings.
Okay. Bitterness cuts through fat and intensifies heat. Great with pork belly, beef tenderloin, fried chicken, and grilled brats. Also great with aged hard cheese or a rich cheese fondue with crusty bread. That all sounds kind of gross.
Yeah, it does. I have none of that in here. I just have beer in a glass. That's all I'm going for. I did eat tacos earlier, though.
All right, so it's probably some... Well, you get chicken tacos, though, don't you?
Yeah, but they're not fried.
All right, fair enough. It is 6.8% before we take a sip here, so hey, it's over our standard of alcohol percentage.
That's good. But I say let's quit stalling. Let's get to this Mike's Hard Grapefruit Lemonade and see what it tastes like.
All right, here we go. I took a big swig there. Ooh.
Ooh, so did I. And I will say it's light.
Is this an IPA?
Yeah, that's what it says. This
is a light IPA.
It very much is. I can definitely taste the grapefruit.
Yeah, I can too. It's not... You know what? It's not super bitter, though. To me, grapefruit's really bitter. That's why I don't like it. Oh, here it comes. Here it comes in the aftertaste. After I took a few swallows. Okay, the aftertaste is heavily grapefruit.
I love it. This is great.
Because the initial swig was pretty good. Hang on, let me do this again. All right. I think you like this right away, right?
Yeah, I definitely like this beer.
Okay. So it's no mystery from you. It's going to be a thumbs up.
Definitely a thumbs up from me. I will say it's not your average IPA, so if you grab it wanting an IPA, you might want to look elsewhere. But if you grab this beer and just for an open mind and try something new, I don't think you'll be disappointed.
Before I give my final judgment, we never described the bottle. Brown bottle. It's maroon and gold? Hey, we're Central Michigan alums. That's nice.
Yeah, that's nice. Do we need to say it's a brown bottle? We've only ever seen one non-brown bottle, and we make a really big deal of it.
Two, Josh. One was painted, remember?
Yeah, we took that because we were desperate.
Okay. But it's, maroon and gold. It's got kind of like a mock Indian cow on it. I don't know how to say it better than that. Yeah,
like a Hindi cow. Like 9 arms. Oh, those are nipples. Never mind.
Udders or nipples, whatever. Okay, here we go. I'm going to render my final judgment. IPAs, I'm very picky on. Sometimes they're almost too bitter for my liking. But even though I don't like grapefruit, the initial drink of this is very good. I can drink it quickly. The aftertaste, not a big deal. If I'm eating something... God, how much of a Michigan accent was that, Josh? If I'm eating something... with this beer, no big deal with the aftertaste. You know what? I'm going to give it a thumbs up, Josh.
Well, good for you, Brian, because you matched my vote. 2 hearty thumbs up from me.
I think it's been a while since we've had a double thumbs up.
At least 2 episodes.
Yeah, it has been. There was a time there where I was worried that we were just going to give double thumbs up to everything, but it's all right. We broke that streak, but now we're back to double thumbs up for Sacred Cow IPA from Arbor Brewing Company.
Out of Ypsilanti, Michigan. You know what, Brian? I'm looking over at my glass here, and I'm drinking quite a bit out of it for this review. But I think it's about halfway through the bottle, but I can't decide if it's half full or half empty.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, is there a difference?
I don't know. Is there? Is the bottle half full or is it half empty?
I don't know. I think we should explore that question, but not until after this break.
After this break, is the bottle half full or is it half empty? Coming up on the Philosophy Jerks.
Beer, 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 I'm going going for a beer. Beer, beer, beer. I'm gonna drink some beer. I like drinking beer. Lovely, lovely beer. Beer, beer, beer. I'm going for a beer. Beer, beer, beer. I'm gonna drink some beer.
Shit, actually, I drank all my beer listening in amazement to you.
This is Chris from episode 20, and you are listening to the... Shit, what's the name of the show? The Philosophy Jerks. What? Why are you looking at me like that? I didn't even know these guys had a show. Hey, is that mic still on?
Demonstrations got boring. Well, it was obvious that the government was ignoring us. It's hard to drag yourself through empty streets on an empty stomach and no sleep. The shortcomings got clearer as the price we paid got dearer and dearer. Supposed to be a case of give and take. Well, I was feeling the give and making a mistake. And I've heard it said that the unexamined life isn't much worth living, and I'm sure they're right. But it's hard to keep on fighting the good fight when no one else seems bothered, yeah, when no one's on your side. Because I'm young enough to be all pissed off, but I'm old enough to be jaded. I'm not the age where I want things to change, but with age my hopes have faded. I'm young and bored of being young and bored. If I was old, I could say I'd seen it all before. In short, I'm tired of giving a shit.
All right, welcome back. The sacred cow is within me, Josh. How about you?
It is within me and without me.
Within and without you. Oh, that makes me want to listen to the Beatles song.
Of course, I planted that for you.
You did. Don't think of a pink elephant. Ah, damn it, I'm thinking of a pink elephant. Okay, so before the break, you asked, is my glass half empty or is it half full?
Yeah, I did, and it's a really tricky question. Wouldn't you agree?
It is. It's all dependent on if you are a pessimist or an optimist.
Well, Brian, it certainly does depend if you're a pessimist or an optimist. And but before we can jump into that, I think this is going to have to be a two-parter, because I think pessimism and optimism are very large topics.
Very large topics indeed, and I think this episode I'm going to look at the glass half empty, Josh.
I agree, Brian, although I do kind of always look at the glass as half empty.
That would make you a pessimist.
Indeed. But before we get into this, Brian, there's this one kind of nagging thing. We kind of get into these topics sometimes, and we don't necessarily define our terms. So I think maybe before we jump in here, we should take a step back and
Define the terms.
Pessimism is a state of mind in which one anticipates undesirable outcomes or believes that evil or hardship in life outweigh the good or luxuries of life. In a philosophical sense, philosophical pessimism is a related idea that views the world in a strictly anti-optimistic fashion. This form of pessimism is not an emotional disposition as the term commonly connotes. Instead, it is a philosophy or worldview that directly challenges the notion of progress and what may be considered the faith-based claims of optimism. Philosophical pessimists are often existential nihilists, believing that life has no intrinsic meaning or value. There you go, Josh.
Well, Brian, I think that completely sums it up precisely, if you will. But I think even for this conversation, we should narrow it down even further. I think we should just talk about the philosophical pessimism.
Indeed. So essentially, philosophical pessimists believe that there is no intrinsic meaning or value to life.
That's correct, and there's a lot of implications of that. But before we get into that, let's kind of review what it means to have no meaning in life.
Right, because sometimes you can get that confused with the idea of just straight up nihilism, right? Where
right, there's nothing
has
life.
Meaning whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's no such thing as meaning. Is very different than life itself not having a meaning.
Right, but this definition points out that it's existential nihilism. So it's not full-on nihilism where nothing has meaning. I think it's more saying that the idea of attributing meaning to something positive is not a worthwhile endeavor.
I think so. And I think at the very least it's going to agree with the idea that when you only look at the world in an optimistic point of view, you're not seeing reality, or you're not seeing the true picture or the truth of what we are in this world. So the question is how does this relate back to the glass being half empty? I think the answer, or something close to it, is going to resemble the concept that when you look out in the world and you go out in the world, for lack of a better word, you expect the worst of all possible cases, right? I mean, that is usually good advice handed down from your grandparents. If you go in expecting the worst outcome, you'll always be surprised. That, in a nutshell, is a form of pessimism.
It is, but don't we? I mean, we have grandparents that are products of the Great Depression era, right? I mean, where they didn't expect anything to be good, so they impart to you this idea of don't expect everything to be good for you, which comes into conflict with a lot of kids that are in a generation younger than you and I, where they expect everything to be good for them. So it's kind of a weird time when it comes to societal pessimism and optimism, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. I think that we're getting away from it a little bit because I think there's more quote-unquote optimists in the world right now than there are pessimists. But we're also getting further and further away from the entire world being at war with each other.
Yes, which our grandparents dealt with.
Oh, I mean, not even just our grandparents. Like Jean-Paul Sartre and all of those troops out of France that came up with the existentialist philosophy, kind of in a way wrote it as a response to being occupied by Nazi Germany.
Well, not only occupied by Nazi Germany, but a world war where the entire world was at war with each other, quite literally.
Well, yeah, I mean, and remember, pessimism isn't just about, we're at war, expect the worst thing. It goes a little deeper than that, and I think what I'm trying to get at when I say that Jean-Paul Sartre and the existentialists reacted to being occupied by Germany is more the fact that it was a realization they had no true meaning in the world and no true agent or identity in the world other than what they were able to create for themselves with it while being occupied, while being subjugated by the German soldiers. You know, kind of like the old idea where if you go to prison, they can do everything but take away who you are and your thoughts.
Mm-hmm. The pessimist in me says that can be disputed somewhat too, right? I mean, putting yourself in the position of prison, there's something about that experience that's going to change the essential you, right? You have to change your worldly perspective of your day-to-day life if you're in prison as opposed to not being in prison.
Well, sure, but the existentialist philosopher in me is going to retort and say that while you do definitely have to change because your environment is changing, what you change into is entirely up to you. You're free to react to your situation however you deem fit.
How very existentialist of you.
There you go.
Yeah.
So what does this have to do with the glass being half empty? Let's take it back there yet again, because I don't feel like we nailed that quite yet. Okay. And I think what the ultimate goal here, what the ultimate meaning of the glass being half empty is not only do you expect the worst of all possible things, but that any sense of progress or of forward thinking is futile, is non-existent in some cases. The idea of calling the glass half empty is kind of matching up to the idea that half empty is all you're going to get. Right, so you're never gonna see full. You're halfway to empty. Right, you're accelerating toward losing everything rather than gaining everything. And the interesting thing is when you consider notions like entropy, the law of entropy, where energy always dissipates, it never reconfigures and becomes more. For instance, I can drop a coffee cup, and every single time I drop a coffee cup, it's going to shatter and lose its shape. Never will I drop a coffee cup and it'll bounce back up into my hand unbroken, or maybe of 2 coffee cups or more. That kind of thing.
Well, I guess in this case, in the glass half empty, you're right. But at the same time, wouldn't it help to kind of talk about what is happiness in a sense? I mean, because doesn't the pessimist say that to not expect happiness is only limited to what you define as happiness? Therefore, don't expect everything to give you happiness?
Well, yeah, of course, that's what they're going to say. But I really feel like the popular notion of that is, or the popular conception of that, rather, is that happiness is useless and you shouldn't strive for it. I don't think that's what a pessimist would necessarily say. I would think that the pessimist rather would say something along the lines of, don't make happiness the goal of your life because life is more complicated and bigger than just happiness. Or, to say it another way, happiness cannot entail everything that makes up life.
Yeah, and doing a little bit of research for this topic too, I came upon a Greek philosopher named Hegesis, which I'm not familiar with. Are you familiar with Hegesis?
Vaguely.
He argued that lasting happiness is impossible to achieve, and that all we can do is try to avoid pain as much as possible. And that was his view on pessimism, whereas he says that happiness is fleeting, and that the ultimate goal is just to avoid physical pain. So the pessimistic view of happiness in his sense is that, like I said, happiness is fleeting. So there's no sense in trying to always achieve happiness because it's not going to last ever.
Well, you know what that sounds like? That sounds like an awful lot like Buddhism. Life is suffering.
Doesn't it? Yeah. But it's hard to argue, right? If you look at the world through a pessimistic worldview, it's hard to argue that point. Like, think of the happiest times you've had in your life. It is just a fleeting moment in the long span of your day-to-day existence, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is, Brian. However, if you think of your awful times or your hard times, they seem to stretch out and last forever. So I think that pessimism might be off the mark here, at least a little bit, because maybe this has more to do with how our brains react to happiness and sadness rather than qualities of happiness and sadness in and of themselves. Like, our brain kind of speeds up and all that.
Okay, so here's an interesting question. Do you more remember the unhappy times in your life, or do you more remember the happy times in your life?
What do you mean by more remember?
Which experiences stick in your mind more? Your moments of unhappiness or your moments of happiness?
Well, if those are my only two options, I would probably say that the unhappy things tend to leave a bigger and lasting impression on my mind, whereas the happiness I tend to remember more vividly.
That's a good way of putting it. Because I was sitting here thinking about myself, and I think the moments of unhappiness or emotional pain, they do. I think they make a bigger impression on my overall experience of life than the happy moments. Why is that, though? Is it because... Do you think it's because we have more happy moments, but they're short-lived, whereas the unhappy moments leave a bigger, how should I put it, mental scar on your mind?
Maybe. I mean, I don't think you're off the mark, but I don't think philosophy would be able to answer that question, honestly. I think that's really a question for psychologists and neuroscience.
It's all under the philosophy umbrella, Josh.
I guess. I mean...
I know. It's just a funny argument I have with Maria often, who leans more to psychology than philosophy.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing, right? So, while you can't necessarily throw philosophy out the window entirely, philosophy is kind of losing ground on the whole we figured it out, this is the truth of the matter arena.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, science in all its forms are being able to predict and explain a lot more. All that's left for philosophy, in a way, and this is a very pessimistic view of philosophy, but all that's really left for philosophy is, a glorified grammar Nazi and the idea of questioning how do we know that the pattern is true and those kind of things, kind of keeping up the questioning of the standard. It's like philosophy's become a little rebel, like teenage rebel again in academia.
It kind of has. You're right. Maybe philosophy in itself in the modern times has become a pessimistic outlook in general.
I just think that philosophy as a mechanism to understand the world has turned in on itself and eaten itself. And what I mean by that is that there's so much going on in philosophy, and it tries to explain so much with ludicrous and outlandish examples that it's become too unrelatable to people, for one. And two, the people that do relate to it, often when you get into conversations, you feel like there's something missing in their worldview. And I don't mean to say all philosophers, but I think as a general tendency.
Well, it becomes more of a game, right? I mean, when you and me were full-on philosophy students entering our senior year, how many conversations did you and I get to where we finally said, God, we're just playing a word game with each other at this point?
Yeah, I think that was actually most of them.
Yeah, right.
Which, going back to the pessimistic idea here, that's exactly what pessimism is getting at, right? Is that as you mature your point of view, as you mature, quote-unquote, mature your point of view to pessimism, you start to see that after that feeling you get, like with philosophy, or like playing the same video game over and over, or playing the same song over and over, after a while, it loses a certain kind of luster. It loses a certain kind of oomph, and you kind of start to see it for what it is. And what I mean by that is, for instance, in philosophy, you start to see it as a bunch of word games that go back and forth. Or like in music, you just start to hear the same patterning notes that are just not inspiring like they used to be, because your brain has become accustomed to them.
Right.
That's kind of the philosophical point in pessimism.
The point being that you can't, how should I put it, that you can't get to the awe-inspiring, this is going to change my perspective and it's going to change the world point of view, and more so, things are just going to be the way they are, and that's just the way it is.
I mean, not even just that, though, Brian. It's the idea that awe-inspiring moment that you had previously was inauthentic and not really worthwhile in terms of knowing the truth of a matter.
That's just depressing, Josh.
I know.
I want my glass half full again.
Well, pessimism would say that you could go for the half-full glass, but you're not going to live in an authentic universe. So essentially you're trading happiness for truth. However, pessimism isn't without its downsides either. And some of these downsides have manifested themselves into physical traits and physically measured reactions to being pessimistic. But before we get into that, Brian, I think we should take a short break.
Yeah, I think you're right. I need to refill my sacred cow here a little bit and think about my glass being half full or half empty. I'm still staring at it and thinking about it.
Man, it kind of bums you out. As we go into break, I kind of want to play a clip montage I did from True Detectives. All right. The Officer Rusty on there is like the man's version of a pessimist. So let's check in on him and get his point of view on what pessimism is, and we'll be back after the break.
The ontological fallacy of expecting a light at the end of the tunnel. Well, that's what the preacher sells. Same as a shrink. See, the preacher, he encourages your capacity for illusion. Then he tells you to fucking virtue. Well, there's a buck to be had doing that. I mean, it's such a desperate sense of entitlement, isn't it? Surely this is all for me. Me, I'm so fucking important. I'm so fucking important, right? Fuck you, people. I think human consciousness was a tragic misstep in evolution. We became too self-aware. Nature created an aspect of nature separate from itself. We are creatures that should not exist by natural law.
Well, that sounds god-fucking awful, Rush.
We are things that labor under the illusion of having a self, this accretion of sensory experience and feeling. Programmed with total assurance that we are each somebody. when in fact everybody's nobody. I think the honorable thing for our species to do is deny our programming. Stop reproducing. Walk hand in hand into extinction. One last midnight, brothers and sisters opting out of a raw deal.
She's feeling very bored and very despondent, and then suddenly there was this huge mechanical failure, and one of the engines gave out, and they started just falling in 30,000 feet. The pilot's on the microphone, and he's saying, I'm sorry, oh my God, I'm sorry, I'm apologizing, and she looks at the man and she says, where are we going? And he looks at her and he says, we're going to a party. It's a birthday party. It's your birthday party. Happy birthday, darling. We love you very, 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 very much. And then he starts humming this little tune, and it kind of goes like this. It's kind of 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Must talk in every telephone, get eaten off the web. Must rip out all.
Okay, welcome back. Now, my secret cow is filled up full way, Josh, so I don't have to think about that. But I have to tell you, my back is kind of sore sitting here.
Is your back half sore?
It's I'd say it's full sore. It's not thrown out, but it's sore.
Do
Do you think that comes from an effect of being too pessimistic about my physical health?
No, I don't think that particularly. But I'm glad you brought that up, because there is a lot of evidence that doctors and people in the medical community and psychologists even have come up with that says pessimistic people tend to live shorter lives, tend to be overweight, tend to be under exercised and malnourished, and just and people that tend to be pessimistic just have a lower quality of life as measured by their surveys.
Well, I can understand that. Why I think you and I can be skeptical people on things. If you were overly pessimistic about everything in life, Josh, I think I would tend to avoid you more so than not. Does that make sense? Have you ever worked with someone at your job where they're just a negative person and their entire outlook is pessimistic on everything?
Well, yeah, I mean, one, I hung out with a bunch of philosophers in college, so yeah, I mean, I lived that.
Right.
And two, of course, to be
fair, that's more of an intellectual pessimism. I'm talking just someone who's just completely pessimistic and negative.
Right. So of course, and I've met other people that were not in the philosophy course that were pessimistic all the time, and the kind of dichotomy between the two that I've learned is that there are two types of always pessimistic people. There are the ones that are only pessimistic when in regards to the topic at hand, right? And they follow it kind of is a consistency. So when you say that, is it partly cloudy or partly sunny, they're more likely to say partly cloudy. If you say we might go to war, do you think we actually would go to war? They're more likely to say yes.
Yeah.
However, there's the other type of always pessimistic person where you go, is it going to be partly cloudy or partly sunny? And they go, what does it matter? Nothing matters. Let me put on some Morrissey and drink some vermouth and smoke clove cigarettes. It doesn't matter.
Right.
And I would argue that from a philosophical point of view, that type of pessimism where you just kind of splatter negativity all over everything for the sake of negativity is actually giving an intrinsic meaning to the idea of pessimism. And by doing that, you're contradicting yourself, and you're living a kind of a cognitive dissonance that lasts forever. Whereas the other type of pessimist, where they only react, or when they're asked a question, they tend to lean toward the pessimistic point of view, I would argue that they are trying to be as realistic as possible. They're looking at past instances of war and what it looked like before we went to war, and comparing it to this hypothetical example and going, yeah, most times when we threaten to go to war, we've actually gone to war. We'll probably go to war this time.
Okay. Would you think it's fair to say that you and I mean, we'll get into it more later when we talk about optimism, but would you say it's fair to say that you and I fall into that second category? I only say that because neither one of us are health nuts. We both smoke, full disclosure here. And it's not because I think, oh, life's meaningless, who cares? But there's a certain aspect where I'm like, well, there's the knowledge in my head. I always keep the knowledge in my head. Well, you know what? I'm dying anyways. So not that I want to speed it up, but there's nothing I can do to stop it. Do you think that's like a healthy pessimism that you and I have?
Well, in this particular example, I always say no, it's not. Because just because you're going to die one day doesn't mean that the quality of life is going to maintain itself until the day you die, right?
Fair
so
enough.
by doing these certain things to your body, yes, you're going to make your death come quicker, but it's more than that. You're going to make your death come quicker, and you're going to make the rest of your life miserable. So I would say that no, that's not necessarily a good way of looking at it, or a healthy way, rather. And I would also say that if you're a true pessimist, you wouldn't care if you smoked or not. You wouldn't care if you can exercise or not. It wouldn't matter.
Right. I wouldn't be conscious of that fact at all.
Right. And I think you and I are the type of people that go out of our way.
Or at least I wouldn't make it part of my daily thought.
Correct. And you and I are the type of people that would go out of our way to do bad things because we tend to lean toward the, what does it matter? We're all going to die anyways camp. Unfortunately. I think we're bad pessimists.
90 slackers, baby.
Yeah, fuck it. We're halfway there. It's good enough. C's get degrees, baby.
That's right.
So, going back to this whole idea, though, of pessimism as being a more true approach to reality, what are your thoughts on that, Brian? What do you think about pessimism being closer to the true way of life versus optimism?
I don't know. It's a tough question and one that I struggle with often, right? Because I tend to agree with the Greek philosopher, I already forgot his name, Josh, that I brought up earlier, where he says that it's impossible to maintain a certain sense of happiness, right? I think that I've met people that in their day-to-day life always keep a positive outlook and a positive mentality. And while I think I gravitate towards those people a little bit more than people that are always negative, there's still something about that person that always maintains a positive attitude that I find phony.
Oh, definitely. Definitely true. I definitely agree with you on that one.
So while I appreciate their outlook of trying to always remain positive, there's that little pessimistic streak in me that just goes, I think you're phony, and there's something about it that bugs me. So with that being said, I think that a certain level of pessimism is healthy in a way.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think that, with pessimism or optimism, I don't think that, leaning completely and exclusively in one way or the other is going to be the philosophically right way to go here. I don't think you're going to get a true view of everything. But again, Brian, we're coming back to happiness here, and that's what's kind of bugging me about it. Is because happiness isn't the measuring cup for pessimism or optimism. It's the authenticity that is important here. It's the total and complete understanding, or the understanding that you can't have an understanding if you go that direction. It's leaning toward that. I think that both optimists and pessimists will both agree that total and complete happiness is unrealistic and probably detrimental to your mental health.
Sure.
I mean, if you're always happy, you're like the Joker,
Yeah, exactly. There's too many things for you to care about to constantly always be happy, in my opinion.
I completely agree. And I think that if you want to be completely happy, you have to block out certain aspects of the world, right? I mean, you can't be thinking about all the people that die every day because they don't have enough food.
Exactly.
And still be happy.
Right. Doesn't it just go back to, is it better to play chess or checkers in the end?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Socrates said, you can be a philosopher or you can be a husband. It's hard to be both.
Indeed it is. All right, Josh. Next episode, should I give a little spoiler? We're going to get into optimism, so perhaps we should end the pessimism part of this right now.
It doesn't matter if we end it or not. I don't care.
All right. Well, one thing you should care about is coming up next. We are going to get to some Q&As that we left off from the previous episode and some new ones we got.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yes. It's always fun when you're in the right mood, Josh, to answer the Q&A.
Well, before I'm in the right mood, I might have to slam one more sacred cow.
All right. Fair enough. Although this time I don't think they're all directed towards you, so I'm kind of happy about that.
Well, I'm not. God damn it. I'm Hollywood over here. Who are you? You're my assistant. Bring my towel and water.
I'm the guy that reads the question.
That's right.
Hey, Josh and the other guy. That's what I'm waiting for in the next Q&A question.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the day someone calls you the hired help.
All right, whatever. Let's take one more break, and we'll be back with Q&A on the Philosophy Jerks.
You goddamn plebeian.
Okay, Josh, I am opening up, I know you hate this term, you can be a pessimist about it, the digital mailbag.
It doesn't matter.
I'm just waiting for the Sunday mail.
When you control the mail, you control information.
First question comes from a good friend of the show, a friend of ours, which we've said before, Mr. Steve Jewell.
Oh boy, this question's going to be gold.
And it is a fairly pessimistic question. The title of it, before I get into this, don't forget, I got to plug this right away. Go to philosophyjerks.com/QA. You can send us a Q&A question very easily that way.
On the all-new and all-redesigned website.
Exactly. Okay, so Steve writes in, the subject of this question is friends and family. Steve says, why is it that more people consider their friends family than their family friends? Could it be that we don't get to pick and choose our family? In my case, I consider most of my friends brothers and sisters, but hate most of my family I hate most of my family. It's kind of worded weird. I'm sorry. Then he says, or what if I'm just trying to construct a new family with people of my choosing? Just spitballing. Maybe I'm answering my own question. Any thoughts?
That is such a Steve question.
Yeah, that is a very Steve question. I mean, he kind of gets to it right away, doesn't he? I mean, family are friends that you don't get to choose, so to speak.
I mean, so to speak, but there's also a quality that family by default will be there when you fall down, whereas a friend may or may not, depending on the situation.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the important distinction, isn't it? I mean, you can feel negative towards people of your family, because it's true, you don't get to choose your family, but in the end, there's like a weird, how should I put it? It's that blood link, right? It's your family. You got to stand by them through thick and thin.
Well, see, I think I have a reasoning around that, because really that kind of mentality is pretty exclusive to select parts around the world. And I really think it comes from something along the lines of, we used to be more of a tribal society where we lived in smaller groups of tribes, for lack of a better word, cities, small cities. So we only knew, 50 to 100 people in our lives. Well, forward march the quote-unquote progression of civilization, and now those tribal units have shrunk down to the size of only your blood family. And, the in-laws that those, your blood family marries.
Right.
So I think that when you go out looking for friends, you have a couple of things going on there, right? You have a deep-seated need to extend your tribe and to extend yourself to new people, because the smaller tribe that you have isn't big enough.
Mm-hmm.
And two, and you might laugh at this, but I really think it's our brain's way of saying, okay, you can't fuck anybody in your family, so let's go meet some new people. If it helps, we'll call them family, and let's go and try to impregnate them, and or meet people that will help you get out to meet other new people that you can then impregnate.
Oh, God, you just opened the can of worms. Someone asked me the question the other day, is it possible to have friends of the opposite sex if you're heterosexual? God, that's a tough question, I think.
I don't think. I have plenty of female friends that I have no sexual attraction to, and it's vice versa.
Maybe, but you've thought about it at least once, haven't you?
I've thought about fucking some of my guy friends at least once. What's your point?
Right. Well, boy, without opening a whole new discussion, I don't know what my point is.
Yeah.
For me, it's harder. Like I do think it's possible, but I think if you're heterosexual and you're opening up a friendship with a member of the opposite sex, it's very easy to get it complicated.
I would agree with you. It does take a little extra skill than just, casually being friends with someone of the same sex, assuming you're, straight and not, LGBT. But I think they suffer from the same problems, just from a slightly different perspective, of course.
Yeah.
But I think the point is still the same, right? You're attracted to a certain sex, and it's really hard to maintain simply a friendship with the sex you're attracted to.
It's hard to fight biology, my friend.
That it is, but not impossible.
So, let's finish off Steve's question here. I mean, biological family. There's plenty of people in my family that annoy me, but at the end of the day, there's still that feeling that, I don't know, they're family, so I'm more willing to put up with their defaults, in my opinion, than I would be with someone that I choose to be friends with.
Well, sure, and I agree with you. I'm the same way with my family, but I still can't help to go back to the Pope earlier, where we were talking about him, and take that kind of philosophy of, well, why can't we extend the love with that, or the kind of love that we have for our family, to all people automatically? Like, start there and let it degrade from that point, rather than start at the bottom and make people work up to that point.
Yeah.
It's an interesting conundrum.
Yeah, it is. God, yeah. I let my family get away with saying a lot more than I would my friends.
I must be family then, because I say a lot of mean shit to you.
At this point, you kind of have become default family, Josh, so
woohoo!
Take that for what you will.
That means we can't breed anymore.
That's true. I can safely say that I haven't had sexual thoughts about you. I hope that doesn't disappoint you. All right, let's move on to the next question before it gets too weird. This question comes from Derek, and I don't know if this is the same 80shorror.net Derek. I'm guessing it probably is.
It might be, but there's a lot of Dereks out there.
There's a lot of Dereks in the world. But anyways, here's the question. It's an interesting one. He says, you are sent to a deserted island, never to leave again. You have an infinite supply of water, but need to make selections about other things you'll bring with you. You're allowed one book and one other person. What do you choose for these two things?
That question is so old. I have the perfect answer for it, but I'll let you go first, Brian.
Okay. One other person. I mean, for me, it's lame, but it's obvious. I have to choose the love of my life, Josh. I have to bring Maria with me. I'm sorry. I hope that doesn't offend you, that I'm not picking you, but I have to take Maria with me. Plus, that gives me the option to procreate on the island.
Okay, fair enough. I wouldn't pick my loved one, but that's okay.
Well, to me, I'm taking the person I spend most of my time with, and like I said, the option to procreate the island. So that one's fairly easy to me. The book one is fairly harder. Um, oh boy. See, this one's tough. Choose one book to bring with me. Okay, so it's got to be something that's long, but that I could get meaning from. You know what I would choose? I would choose the Ultimate Book of Slackers itself. I would take the Tao with me.
The Tao Poo.
Yeah, when I'm really bored on the island, I'll just read about why being bored's good in the Tao, and I'll be good to go.
Okay, well, that's a fairly good answer if you're thinking within the box. Me, myself, I would take a book about how to build the raft, and the person I would take is the world's best raft builder.
Okay.
I'm off the island. I go back to my loved one. I'm back to where I was. I don't have to deal with coconuts the rest of my life.
I feel like this is an Odyssey of the Mind project here.
What do you mean?
Did you ever have Odyssey of the Mind when you were in school?
Uh-uh.
So Odyssey of the Mind, I got to give my parents a lot of credit for putting me in this group, and my teachers. They thought I was good enough to be in this group. Let me brush off my own shoulder here. But basically, it was this group in grade school. It's called Odyssey of the Mind. And they would give you certain scenarios where you basically had to problem solve questions like this, but, related to, third and fourth graders. It was a pretty sweet group, I got to admit.
So did anyone come up with the idea of just taking a book about how to build a raft?
No, it wasn't that. They'd give you certain scenarios. The one that sticks out in my head was I remember they gave us an envelope, a rubber band, what was it? An envelope, a rubber band, a piece of paper, and something else, and a light bulb. And the thing was you had to figure out how could you drop a light bulb from the top of a ladder down to the ground without it breaking. That was just one example. There would be more thought-provoking questions, but they were also problem-solving questions too.
It sounds like Little MacGyver Club.
That certain scenario was, but they would give you questions kind of similar to this question, the desert island question, but more directed towards 9 and 10-year-olds. My parents probably unwittingly pushed me towards philosophy by putting me into that group when I was a kid.
Oh man, see, they're gonna regret ever doing that now.
Yeah, but I love them for it now. So this question just kind of reminded me of that because, my answer was, well, I take my loved one and one that gets me through the boredom, whereas you give the answer of, I'm choosing the option that gets me off the goddamn island.
Oh, fair enough. I mean...
In Odyssey of the Mind, your question probably would have been more correct.
Yay, I'm a young philosopher.
A problem solver.
I'm like a goddamn crow inside a cage with a treat box.
All right, what do you say we get to one more question?
Let's do one more question.
This one comes from Kim, and of course, Josh, this one's directed towards you.
Oh my god, we need like a theme
Another
song.
lady.
I know, right? We need a theme song or like a sound effect for this. It's getting too frequent.
Another lady asked Josh a question. All right. From Kim, it just starts off, hey, Josh. I love it. It's just right away. It just, fuck Brian. It just says, hey, Josh. Fuck the guy reading the questions.
You are just the hired help,
Yeah, right. Anyways, it just says, hey, Josh. Love the segment on dying cities. The episode about Centralia, even if it was wallpapered with music. And then she says, you seem to have a knack for this sort of thing. Any plans on doing more segments like that on the show? Perhaps with more people talking than just you? Keep up the great work.
Oh man, I don't know if that was a compliment or a insult.
I believe it's one of those backhanded compliments.
I think so too. Yeah, it was that segment was wallpapered with sound, but purposely. I mean, that wasn't like something I didn't think about, right? So that was kind of the purpose of it,
right?
But to go back to her other question, which was, are we gonna have some more things like that on the show? I think so, especially with other people talking. Like we've said before, though, this isn't our full-time job, so it's really hard to find a lot of people to talk with us.
Mm-hmm.
But I would really like to take it there again, especially with more people. I mean, it's just fun once you get in the editing room to have all that material to go through and edit and put together and make a really cool-looking segment.
Yeah, and what we said before, too, is a lot of the thing is not a lack of people to have on with us, so to speak. It's making sure we have someone who feels comfortable in discussing the topic at hand.
Oh, for sure, and that's a little difficult, especially for how we want to keep it, right? We don't want to bring in people that are the experts in their field necessarily. We're more interested in people that have a unique and down-to-earth and humanistic point of view on their field, so that it can be more easily related back to everybody. So,
right.
and we've kind of set ourselves up for a little bit of trickery there with that, but I think for the better, I really do think that's for the better.
Right, because we get a lot of positive response on Mike from China, on our Inside China in the Media episode. A lot of people really appreciated his insight on that, being in China and kind of putting the human perspective to it.
Exactly, and a situation like that just doesn't come up as often as we'd like it, especially since we have to align so many stars for that to make sense.
Especially him being an exact 12-hour time difference.
Yeah, that was interesting. I will kudos to him for cracking a beer open that early.
Especially for him, cracking open a beer at 10 in the morning.
I know, right before work. That guy's a soldier.
Mike's always been that way, though.
Oh, yeah. We have a few stories, but whatever.
So there's your answer, Kim. Yes, we plan on doing more. We plan on doing all sorts of stuff in the future. Jeez, we're only 26 episodes in. I almost messed that up.
Ooh. Yeah, and this whole thing is just for fun, right? I mean, we're just throwing things against the wall to see what sticks. So
right. We take it serious, but it's our hobby, not our job.
Exactly. So, I mean, look forward to more things, but don't look forward to it being necessarily a regular thing, at least for in the foreseeable future.
Fair enough. All right. With that said, Josh, what about the music that was played on this episode? We always do that. All right. The first song, Josh, was by Frank Turner, and it was called Once We Were Anarchists. And I don't know about you, but it really reminded me of our younger days, you and me both.
Yeah, I really like that song. It's a good song.
It does. It really captures the pessimism of getting older. All right, what was next?
The second song we heard was a Bright Eyes song called At the Bottom of Everything. The reason I picked this song was simply that the way that this guy chose to react to the plane crashing is exactly what we were trying to talk about earlier in terms of being free to define your situation however you see fit, no matter what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. Connor can capture a certain kind of pessimism and depression that not many others can.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely agree with you. I think the only other person from that era that I can think of that matches that, maybe Elliott Smith.
That's who I was thinking. Hey, we're on the same page.
Look at that.
All right, the last song, speaking of being on the same page, that 90s slacker mantra just keeps bubbling through, Josh.
I know, we can't get rid of it. We have a Pink Floyd cover, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, by the classic 1 or 2 song supergroup Class of '99.
Yes, which included, for those who don't know,
it included Lane Staley, I believe a few people from Pearl Jam, and God, I can't remember the third band that was part of that. But essentially, they got together to record this one song. Really, it's part 1 and part 2 of Another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd off of The Wall. They recorded it for this movie soundtrack for Faculty in 1999, which that movie itself is just a Invasion of the Body Snatchers update. Really good cover, I thought, even though if they probably were going to make a whole album, I don't know if I would have dug the whole album.
Yeah. How many super groups was Pearl Jam in the 90s?
I don't know, man. It's hard to keep track.
I'm going to be pessimistic about it.
It doesn't matter.
All right, Josh. I think that's going to wrap things up. As always, follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at The Philosophy Jerks.
Yes, don't forget we're on SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Tuned In Radio. Speaker, which is iHeartRadio.
There you
go. And, of course, everything and more can be found at our Philosophy Jerks website, philosophyjerks.com, including the all-new, all-updated podcast app player just for the show. So check us out right there, philosophyjerks.com, and leave us a Q&A if you feel so inclined.
Please do. And, one last thing about the website. You set it all up. If you are new to the episode, we have all the recommended episodes to listen to right off the bat. Or if you want to introduce someone new to the show, all new episodes that you should listen to right there.
Yes, Brian, absolutely correct. So join us at philosophyjerks.com and in 2 weeks with a sequel episode to this podcast episode, which will be Optimism.
And a extra little added benefit to that, I will be joining you in the Think and Drink Studios in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Josh. I can't wait.
I can't wait either, but I'm going to be pessimistic and say I hope nothing goes wrong.
I'll get there safe, I promise. Until next time, don't stop thinking, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Hello.
So the best thing about the Pope, I think I should have said, was when he was addressing people in Congress, there were fucking senators and politicians everywhere crying, fucking knowing they're evil scumbags. And one guy quit his job.
I know, right?
I love it, dude. Fucking, I hope he hangs himself.
Because Boehner is a Catholic, man.
Hardcore Catholic, and fucking Pope called him on some shit.
He did, too, and he was like, "You're right, I suck."
I don't deserve this job.
I quit.
Ah.